Welcome to the Well Seasoned Librarian Podcast. I'm your host, Dean Jones. This is Season 11, Episode 14. Today I'm very pleased to be speaking with Mae Harris, whose blog Old Lime Plate features the food history of the cooking of Maryland. She is also the author of the new book, Festive Maryland Recipes. In 2011, Harris started Old Lime Plate, a blog about Maryland food history. She began by drawing recipes from Maryland's Way, a cookbook of 18th century recipes. Her interest in data led her to create a database of all the recipes she found, which eventually took over the blog. When she is not working as a college admissions officer, cooking, or blogging, Harris digitally enters recipes into her database at the Maryland Historical Society, the Enoch Pratt Free Library, and smaller historical collections in the state. I'm going to take you now to my conversation with Mae Harris of Old Lime Plate. Welcome to the Well Seasoned Librarian Podcast. I'm your host, Dean Jones. Today I'm speaking with Mae Harris, who wrote the blog Old Lime Plate that features the food history and cooking of Maryland. She's also the author of a new book, Festive Maryland Recipes. Kara, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I do all my research in libraries, and I'm kind of this so-called independent scholar, so I was really excited to come onto your podcast.
Yeah, and I want to talk to you about that, actually. That's going to be one of the topics. Kara, your book and blog is about Maryland. Did you grow up there?
Yes, I grew up in Prince George's County, which is actually closer to DC. A lot of the foods that I read and write about now are based more in Baltimore and the eastern shore of Maryland, but I try to find stuff from my home region as well to write about. It's a really diverse state as far as the regionality of the food.
What are some of your favorite food memories of growing up in Maryland?
My favorite memories mostly involve my extended family, even fried fish, crabs, of course, and also I used to gather blackberries with my grandmother, and make pie with my grandmother from blackberries that we found kind of by the side of the road. So that's always a good one for me.
I'm going to be actually gathering blackberries later today with my dog.
I'm jealous because what we have now is these invasive wine berries, and they're okay. They're kind of a raspberry relative, but nothing beats a blackberry that's been really sitting in the hot sun, and I hardly ever find them anymore.
I'm lucky. We have them. They're kind of wild everywhere here. So if you look for them, you could pretty much find them wherever there's water.
Nice.
Did you have any food mentors growing up? Did you have a relative that kind of guided you in your cooking?
I didn't do much cooking until I became an adult. I did used to make those pies with my grandmother. We also would do a fair amount of canning, pickles, and strawberry preserves. So a lot of my best food memories really come from doing things alongside her in the kitchen.
What sparked your interest in the food history of Maryland?
I found all these recipes with Maryland in the name, and I was absolutely baffled by some of them. So I just started making them and researching them online. I have a set of cookbooks called the Southern Heritage Cookbook Library. And what I later learned is they actually adapted recipes from a cookbook called Maryland's Way. And when they did so, they added Maryland to the name of the recipe. So I found a lot of things that I maybe thought were more important, Maryland baked liver, and some that are important, like Maryland fried chicken in these cookbooks. And I just really wanted to learn about them.
Since you started your blog, Old Lime Plate, you've amassed over 50,000 recipes. Did you ever think in your wildest dreams that this would happen to you in the future?
No, when I started the database, it was I thought it would help me do research and help make connections between the recipes and the people that were associated with the recipes and the different locations and things. But I really had no idea that I would end up continually amassing more cookbooks to add to it and more topics. I also kind of had no idea really how I would be organizing this information. I didn't think about the fact that some recipes appear across multiple cookbooks, just copied verbatim, and they might end up in my database multiple times and things like that. So when I first started it, I really had no idea where it was going.
How did your research change your perception of Maryland?
I started to think of Maryland as the South, which is a really hotly debated topic that a lot of
Yeah.
people get weird about. But in researching the culinary history of Maryland, I really learned how people would come down here and expect to be wined and dined in a Southern fashion with all the baggage that goes with it. So that kind of changed my perception of Maryland and helped me to understand some of the systematic problems that still exist here through food even. So I would say that's the biggest one.
Were there any big surprises when you're doing your research?
One thing that I thought was really interesting, so I've started cataloging, many years ago, I started cataloging manuscript cookbooks that were handwritten, and I was surprised to learn how many of these recipes in these old manuscript cookbooks had actually never been tried. People would copy things or cut and paste things, and I've worked with cookbooks that just have such a huge quantity of recipes that you can tell the owner of the book never even got around to trying a lot of them. So that was something that I thought is a little bit more modern than we would think. I think a lot of people collect recipes now, but that's actually kind of nothing new.
What's changed for you since you started the blog Old Lime Plate?
I'm a pretty shy person, so it's really helped me connect with people, and given me a reason to kind of reach out to people and learn more about their background and their families. And of course, the books have connected me to people even more. So that's really the main thing. And also I've learned, that's how I taught myself database skills, which I use in my day job. So that was pretty helpful as well.
Your recipe database would eventually appear on Atlas Obscura. That kind of really took the website and put it out into the world. Was this an exciting or a scary time for you when that happened?
It is a little scary now, the way people can be online, being out in the public, but mostly it's been great. People reach out to me sometimes to donate cookbooks. So
Yeah.
I get to add those to my library and kind of be the steward of them, eventually maybe to donate, to a public library or a university library. So that's been great. People reach out to me to find recipes, which is always fun because it often alerts me to things that I didn't realize were, either Maryland recipes, or people had associations with certain memories. And sometimes they're just right in my database under my nose that whole time, and I didn't realize their importance. So the more that I get out there, the more of that kind of interaction I get, and it's been pretty nice. Some of the negative comments have been actually sort of funny. When I attempted to make Maryland beaten biscuits, I did a really bad job, and they were kind of, it's a 200-plus-year-old recipe. So they're just unsightly by the standards of people who make them on a regular basis. And I got all these almost angry comments. And at first I was a little hurt, but then I really started to kind of respect people's passion for maintaining this tradition, not having it kind of disrespected. So if that's the worst blowback that I'm going to get, I think I've done all right.
I want to talk about your first cookbook, which is named after the website Old Lime Plate. This came out last year at the tail end of the quarantine. Can you talk about how you pitched the book to the publisher and how you got the word out about it during the quarantine?
So I actually am the publisher.
Nice.
That was kind of an interesting process that happened almost on a whim. I had made a book and online and printed some photographs of my dog that had passed, and I received this book and I started to realize the possibilities of digital printing. So I got kind of obsessed with laying out this book. It was primarily existing blog posts. I didn't really expect it to be anything that was, going to be a bestseller or anything, which it is not, but it ended up being much bigger than I thought. A lot more people would buy copies and then come back and buy more copies. People who saw it wanted to buy copies. So that was really exciting to me. But But yeah, it's self-published on, one of these platforms where they kind of print them on demand. And the quality of those has actually gotten so amazing that I still look at it and I'm just like in awe that I could create this with my own, on my own devices.
What was the local response in Maryland to the cookbook?
People were so nice about it. Like I said, some people would come and buy more copies or refer their friends or buy copies as gifts. My husband actually delivered a lot of the books on bike around the city, so I would see people post on social media when they received the book in their mailbox, and that was just kind of really fun, mapping out where all the books were going. And I ended up doing a little talk at Atomic Books here in Baltimore, just as like a celebration of the release of the book, and went over some of my favorite stories about food in Baltimore and people's perceptions who have come here. So yeah, it was really a lot more of a response than I had expected.
You have a new book out, Festive Maryland Recipes, which is available now for pre-order. We're going to have a link to that in the bio I want to mention for people listening. Can we talk about how you came to write this book? And I know that it features a lot of holidays and festivals in the book. Can we talk about those as well?
So this book actually was in the works before my previous book, maybe in a smaller format. I anticipated doing a little photocopied zine or something like that. And it kind of snowballed. After I created the other book, I went back to the idea and started to rope in other people. I had already talked to my friend who's a designer about designing this zine, but I said, well, maybe we should contact a recipe developer and have her help us make recipes that people can actually follow. And then I have a friend who's an illustrator, so we got him involved. So the book kind of turned into something that was, a little bit more real and legitimate and thought out. Oh, you asked about the holidays in the book. Sorry.
That's okay.
Yeah, sorry, I lost track. There's all this kind of standards in there, but I'm personally particularly interested in some of the specific holidays that different groups would celebrate, like St. David's Day among the Welsh miners that were in Western Maryland, and Fastnacht before Lent, which actually making the donuts is something that my family has been doing. So Maryland has long had all these different groups with specific holidays that had food traditions. We also have a sizable Jewish population, so we have several of those holidays in there, along with Lunar New Year and Thanksgiving, Christmas. And we also we just wanted to kind of end it on a note of general celebration. So we put in a recipe for strawberry festivals, which were kind of a spring way that people would celebrate the arrival of strawberries, kind of launch the summer, raise money for their churches. And we put a recipe for a strawberry cobbler in. It's a little bit more fresh food than a lot of the winter holidays with the raisins and dried fruits and things, and heavy foods. So we kind of ended it on a little bit more of a spring note, because the majority of these holidays do fall in the winter months, which makes sense when you think about how and why humanity is gathered. But I didn't want to just grasp at straws just to put token summer things in there, so we ended it with the spring strawberry festivals.
Is the food in Baltimore different from the rest of the state?
That's an interesting question. Historically, Baltimore has kind of been the epicenter where people would come, even though a lot of the famous seafood and things would be harvested on the Eastern Shore, as well as a lot of the produce. People would come to Baltimore on the railroad and come to the hotels here. So this is really where people, I think, expect to find Maryland food. But of course, in Baltimore, we had a lot of concentrated groups of immigrants who came here. So I ended up with quite a few Baltimore neighborhood specific recipes in the book, like Lumbee chicken and pastry, and Jewish recipes for Shavuot and a recipe for Passover. So Baltimore had these enclaves with different traditions, and sometimes they would interweave, like with sauerkraut, which became something that everybody in Baltimore does for Thanksgiving. But sometimes they stayed a little bit more isolated, and you don't see that quite as much throughout the rest of the state, certainly not in the concentrations that you would see in Baltimore.
I visited Baltimore before, and I really enjoyed my time there, and I had great food, of course. I thought it was a really singularly beautiful state as I traveled through it. Are there any foods that you'd recommend to a travel there that's visiting Maryland?
Um, I don't go out much. I don't get out
Okay.
much. The place to get crab cakes is like Fadley's, just because I feel like it's good to experience Lexington Market, and that's where I buy a lot of fish and things that I need to make my recipes. There's an interesting dining scene here that's always changing, but I'm not a really adventurous person that's always trying the latest. So if I were to take someone out, I would probably just send them for the crab cake, but I actually prefer to make them at home. So sorry, I don't have a really good answer to that one.
That's totally fine. Are there any food writers or food celebrities that you enjoy following?
I follow the research of William Wise Weaver, who
Oh,
writes a lot about Pennsylvania Dutch and Pennsylvania foodways, and a lot of that dovetails into Maryland. He actually wrote the foreword and did a reprint of Elizabeth Ellicott Lee's 1845 cookbook, which is the oldest published Maryland cookbook. I also like David Shields, who writes about more Southern cuisine, and his book Southern Provisions has a chapter about the Maryland Club feast that goes into a lot of the different dishes that would be served to people visiting Baltimore or among the Baltimore elite and their background. I like to follow things they do, but I always try to read different food writing articles and learn more outside of my little Maryland pod that I've made for myself, because sometimes my own research is so narrowly focused.
I've had a lot of other guests on the program that are what I consider food archivists who kind of delve into the history of regional recipes and kind of mine cookbooks in a local region. Now, I imagine you've had a chance to talk to other food archivists or librarians. What was your experience with the research? And I feel like the people in this community are fairly generous. What was it like for you as you started?
Oh, absolutely. For many years, I would go to the Enoch Pratt Free Library, and they have a Maryland room with a collection of cookbooks. So I would sit there and type their recipes into my index, and got to know some of the librarians. They actually might occasionally refer people to me if people have questions. So at first it was just about seeing all the different cookbooks and learning which ones were maybe the kind of standard or classic Maryland cookbooks. And then I started traveling to university libraries. I went to Michigan to some university libraries and looked at different manuscripts and culinary collections. I've had Virginia Tech scan some items that are in their culinary collections. So these Maryland documents end up kind of all over the place. And I always enjoy going to new libraries and having things pulled that maybe are unexpected and haven't gotten a lot of attention from other researchers in a while. So that's always fun.
So what's next for you?
I'm still trying to figure that out. I love making books, so I would like to make another book, maybe a summer companion to the holiday book of recipes for some of Maryland's special summer foods like tomatoes and corn that we
Ooh,
love so much, since those things aren't really represented in the book, nor are crabs for that matter. But I really need to get kind of in a certain mode obsessed to follow through on a project. So I'm kind of waiting for that inspiration. I think that I have to kind of play out the promotion and selling of my current book before I can really dig down and start doing something else. I've also been in talks about maybe doing a holiday TV special in 2024, which would be interesting because I could interview some of the different people that I have talked to about their food traditions and kind of highlight their work in the flesh, which would be nice.
That sounds wonderful. I hope that gets to happen. I would love to watch that. That sounds great.
Yeah, I hope so too. I don't have a really TV ready personality, but I think if we can get enough other supporting cast and characters on it, it might be something that could be really interesting and really showcase people who are keeping traditions alive.
Yeah, that sounds like a real winner. I like that. That sounds good. Kara, I want to thank you for being on the podcast. I've enjoyed getting a chance to talk to you. I want to let everybody know we're going to have a link to Kara's books in the bio. You could check that out. And also you could check out the website, Old Lime Plate. Kara, thanks for being on the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
It was a pleasure. That was my conversation with Kara Mae Harris of the blog Old Lime Plate. Her new cookbook, Festive Maryland Recipes, is out now. We have links to it in the bio, and you could buy it at all better bookstores. Tomorrow, we'll be speaking with Rachel Gordon Barnett, Lisa Klingman Harvey about the food of the Jewish community in South Carolina with their new book, Kugels and Collards, of the blog of the same name. And that'll be tomorrow. Until then, I'll see you at the library.